I'd like to welcome back Chris Morley to the stage. And he's going to be our last speaker today, and he's going to share a little bit of his experiences in dealing with foot and mouth disease in the UK.
Caroline, Christina rather, asked me to give you a bit of an update of what happened in the UK. I worked for a year on that outbreak as a young vet and saw some many sad things during that year. She said, don't make it too gruesome, too horrible. Well, it's kind of hard not to, because it was horrible and gruesome. But I'm going to focus, though, on the human side of it, the impacts on producers and the impacts on the people working in the event as it happened. So the typical picture, this is a farmer from 2001. Media love to get these pictures, and thankfully you can't see him, but a lot of very distraught people. So we'll just flick to the start of it. The first case was detected in an abattoir near London in Essex in February 2001. The vet at the abattoir reported vesicular disease in pigs. The next day it was confirmed by the Wadebridge lab, which is a world reference lab for FMD in London, as FMD, and they initially started trying to work out, well, where's it come from? Because with most disease outbreaks, the first case often isn't the first case, it's just the first one you found. So they looked at 600 farms that had supplied pigs or swine over the last 2 weeks to that abattoir. So England's very diversified, lots of animals moving big distances, so quite a task. And they visited all of these farms to check the livestock. They focused on those that were feeding swill. So it's in the UK at the time, you're allowed to feed waste products from hospitals, from army bases, from schools, food that's been thrown in the canteen bin, and it has to be cooked and heat treated to inactivate it. And on the Thursday of that week, they found the infected farm up at Hebden on the Wold in Northumberland. These are quite gruesome pictures. Those pigs are lying down because they can't stand up. They've got horrible hoof lesions. And what happened on this farm, it was a bit of a start of the disaster spiral, which I'll explain. It continued through the whole outbreak of disease. The owner had already been prosecuted for welfare issues. He wasn't a good farmer. His brother was sick. He'd stopped cooking the food he was receiving. So there was food coming in, and it was probably imported from overseas, possibly South America, been gone through army bases and hospitals, and then he's fed it. So these pigs got sick with foot and mouth disease. He didn't tell anybody, didn't report it for a number of weeks. And you can see he got prosecuted quite severely afterwards for this. The problem was it then created 2,000 more cases on farms and many, many millions of deaths of animals. So I'll just quickly explain just how fast this thing spreads, because it kind of gives you an idea of the sheer magnitude of this outbreak. A few days later, FMD was confirmed 5 kilometres away on a mixed farm, a cattle and sheep farm, Prestwick Hall Farm. That jumped that distance on the wind, most likely. It was downwind. This disease will spread on the wind. On the Sunday when they slaughtered this farm, they found that 5 of 11 sheep had got healing lesions, which is a very bad thing to see. Animals that are getting better from foot and mouth, because it means it's been there a while and has had a chance to spread. Also, 16 of those sheep had been sold a few days earlier to a large sheep market at Hexham. This picture on the left is sort of northern England. We've got a pointer. So Prestwick Hall Farm here, sheep moved to Hexham, and then shortly after, the next day, to Longtown Market, which is the largest sheep auction market in the country, or was back then. At that time, dealers were buying sheep, selling sheep. There's a lot of sheep moving around the country. The way the system was set up with the EC funding, you get subsidies for owning sheep. It also encouraged people to illegally move sheep at that time. So if I was a sheep farmer with 300-400 ewes, the government would come out and count those animals. Some unscrupulous farmers would then move those sheep to a neighbouring property, literally through the hedge. So when the government guy came and counted them again, they were double dipping. And this is well written up, so I'm not sort of telling the UK state secrets here. And it's contributed to the severity of the epidemic, because so many illegal movements. Anyway, these sheep that we're talking about, 9 of the 16 sheep were purchased by a dealer. They were mixed with 175 more sheep, and they moved to Longtown Market, and they were penned overnight. As I say, the biggest market in the UK. So this market supplied, in the 2-week period, they sent sheep out, other than to slaughter, to actual farms, all those yellow dots across the whole of the UK, down in Devon, up in Scotland, Aberdeen here. They're all animals that have gone through that market. And then the next slide tells us what we knew at that point. We knew that we'd had disease down here in Essex at the slaughterhouse, and it had already spread to a nearby farm. And the 2 cases, the original case and Prestwick Hall Farm. What we didn't know, and this is a ticking time bomb, is this was going on. All these farms are already infected with foot and mouth disease. So you can see every red dot is a farm. And at that point, nothing had been done. There was no movement control in place. Nobody was looking for it. Nobody was trying to stamp it out. So it gives you some idea of why it was such a bad outbreak. We found it late. The resources that were there to deal with it were insufficient. The state vet service, the equivalent of CFIA here, had been cuts and cuts and cuts for many decades. So they were struggling to react to something of this magnitude, and the sheep movements that were occurring at the time. Now, we'll switch into the human side of it now. This is typical rural England. We've got lots of very beautiful hill country with a few scraggy sheep wandering around, and they're part of the beauty of it. They probably don't earn a lot of money on their own, but the subsidies make up for it. That's the profit for most farmers. And this is countryside that's crisscrossed with footpaths. These footpaths have been there, in many cases, for over 1,000 years. They're old historical routes between villages and parishes. And in the summertime, these areas are crisscrossed by walkers. I used to, as a student, out most weekends, tromping up and down these hills. So the countryside is wide open, very different to here. You've got national parks, but here people walk through your farms every day in the UK. So when you get scenes like this going on in these beautiful parts of the world, this is a slaughter team preparing to kill these. These are Swaledale ewes, upland ewes. It's very distressing for the general public, for people that live in these areas. It's not out of sight. This is a main road here. They've closed it for the actual the call to take place. And there's the next image, dead sheep. Lambs pulled to the side, because it's harder to kill lambs with a captive bolt gun, so they bring them to the side to make sure they have, and the adults to the right. And this is a kind of, when you're working on these events, I was fortunate enough to work on 10, which I actually ran the cause on 10 farms, both sheep and cattle. You can always spot the disaffected farmer. There she is. She's not wearing any gear. She's not kind of doing anything. She's in this just stunned kind of silence of, I can't believe this is quite happening to my farm, to me. And these are the people we really had to watch. We were very lucky we had farmer advocate groups that would provide a case officer to the farmer to work with them, to be someone to listen to. Fortunately, all the people here in the background are generally, although they're standing around now, they're busy, and the next day they've gone to a different farm to do the same again. So it's really important to have that contact for these people. This is a typical, again, farm. This is up in Malham Cove, if anyone's been to Yorkshire in northern England. Very famous, beautiful spot, a big limestone escarpment above. And this is the main road, and this is a dairy farm infected. The vets turned up to have a look, and then there's an army Land Rover to the right. Both the milk tankers have had to stop, obviously, because they realise there's a problem. And talking about biosecurity, it's a nightmare, because unlike a Canadian farm where you've probably got one entrance, you can put a gate and a sign. Here, this is the main road. The kids are going to school. There's everybody trying to go through the farm. So you block that up, you cause a headache straight away. This is, again, a typical scene. Here's our farmer. And he's being explained what's going to happen. His entire herd is going to be killed. Really interesting. This chap here is a vet. I didn't actually work directly with him, but he was the ex-wife of our communications director in Edmonton. And when she reviewed this presentation last week, she was kind of surprised to see her ex-husband on one of my pictures. But the important message here is this chap, it's a dairy farm. He's born on the farm. He's had animals on his farm all of his life. I grew up on a dairy farm. And when you have small herds, in most cases, you probably carve most of those cows onto your farm. So you brought them into this world. They tend to live a long while, maybe have 7, 8 calves out of them. You maybe carve some of them. So you're intimately with them. You milk them in the morning and the evening. You spend more time with the cows than your wife. So you do build a bond up. And we all hate as farmers, certainly I did, when you send them for slaughter, conventional for meat at the end of their life, we try not to think about what's going to happen. You know, they've gone off on a truck, gone to market, and yeah, it's not very nice, but she's had a good life. When it happens on your own farm and you see this happening, and many farmers want to see it, and I encourage them to be around, to be part of that, it's very distressing. And these are some of his heifers being prepared, but these are Frisian heifers, so they're not like the tall, lanky Holsteins here. These are big fat things that produce big calves. In their prime, these animals are, and then bang. Very, very distressing to see that happening, and particularly on a farm where you've been the boss, you are the boss, and suddenly a bunch of strangers turn up and do this. So quite traumatic. And then obviously these very horrific scenes of you've got to get them away into trucks. It's not nice when you know those animals. Another very sad scene. Lots of farmers in quite a lot of distress. One farmer, I remember, he tried to kill himself while we were there. I remember actually just leaving the call and going off with him. He'd gone off with his gun and sitting there just in tears with a loaded rifle, and you're just trying to talk him out of it. And obviously we did in that case. Fortunately, one of my colleagues wasn't so lucky. He killed himself the weekend I got married. We just got to the end of the killing, and we're moving into restocking, and that was still very desperate because people wanted to get back to normal, couldn't because of the restrictions and movement controls. And he unfortunately took his life, which was kind of sport things somewhat. Another scene here. Again, here's your disaffected farmer's wife. So really difficult times, and this is where the industry associations really come into their own. In the UK, it was a National Farmers Union, NFU, very strong, very good at getting advocates, case officers involved, and that's why the associations here are so critical to producers. We'll talk just briefly about the people working on these events, because here we have 2 slaughtermen in the front and a veterinarian at the back, and in the background you can see a bucket full of dead sheep. It was really difficult being exposed to this all the time. The slaughtermen, in some ways, have been preconditioned to it. They're killing animals every day in their day job back at the abattoir. But many of these, in the farm situation, they weren't used to dealing with farmers who are absolutely broken people. And also the vets, that it always shocked me, the young vets. I'd been in practice 4 or 5 years, so I had the sort of rough edges knocked off. Some of these young vets are still at university, and the first thing they dealt with in real life was killing. And some of them just couldn't cope. Others seemed to take to it very, very well, which always concerned me, because how do you start your career when you're 50,000 animals down before you've saved anything? So it was always quite a worry. The other issue is you get to know these farmers. This is a chap called George Musgrove. He's a sheep farmer in Bishopdale in Yorkshire, and there's me smiling. These animals are still healthy. 4 weeks later, they were all dead. They were next door to an infected farm. So you build up relationships with these guys, because you need to build that trust. But you know in the back of your mind they're quite likely going to get disease. So that was always difficult. Again, another very, very good swine farmer, free-range system here. I was lucky enough to meet him in the early stages. We visited the pigs every other day, and then his farm was affected. They were all killed. So you almost have to keep a little bit back for yourself to survive, because you would quite easily go mad. Nice just picture of the slaughter teams. These were some of the heroes of it. They were guys that could talk to farmers, had real empathy, were local knowledge, and they quietly got on and did the dirty job of killing thousands of animals. So they were really good to work with. This is a mixture here. We've got a couple of vet students on I mentioned the vet students getting roped in. They didn't become vets to do this job. And we've got a veterinarian here and some case officers. So it was really important to watch out for people and to debrief. We found the best way to debrief in the evening was actually down the pub, which is very easy to do in England because there's lots of pubs. And they sell lots of warm, tasty beer, which is very different from what you guys tend to drink sometimes. It's interesting when you talk to doctors that work in emergency departments that deal with train crashes, plane crashes, car accidents. They actually, say we often do exactly the same, go down and have a few beers with the people that have been through this, so you share those experiences. And it is actually the psychologists would disagree with me, but from practical terms, it's a very good way just to talk about things over a pint. And finally, life does return to normal. Most of the farms where I worked on, I've stayed in touch with, and Christmas cards and postcards and things, and it all looks pretty good at the moment. So life does get back to normal, but it's pretty hard for them to realise that at the time. So at that point, I'll just finish off, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Germs on the run, and the saleswoman and serviceman are targeting each one, sending germs on the run, germs on the run, germs on the run, germs on the run. Well, a new disease that can emerge so fast, but don't you wear a frown, because your friends at Merck are searching everywhere, solutions will be found. Germs on the run, germs on the run, and the poultry vet who used to brag